Royal Ceremony, London, 1997. A princess in a white suit kneels before a soldier in camouflage, still in his wheelchair. Behind them, a room full of dignitaries stands watching, royals, politicians, military brass. But for these two, no one else exists. The number that defines this moment: 247 days since a handwritten letter arrived at a military hospital. The letter he burned, then pulled from the trash at 3 a.m. The letter that's now folded in his jacket pocket, edges charred, words memorized. Princess Diana takes his hand. Not a handshake, not protocol, something more personal. What the cameras captured: compassion. What they missed: she's keeping a promise made in a Sarajevo minefield. This soldier lost both legs searching for a stranger's child. Diana knew the child survived before anyone told him. The mystery the photograph hides: why hasn't he walked yet? And what did she show him that would change everything? The mine went off on April 14, 1995, in a field 3 kilometers outside Sarajevo. Sergeant Paul Henson, 28 years old, British Army peacekeeping mission, was supposed to be on perimeter patrol. He wasn't. He was searching. A local woman had come to the base 2 days earlier, claiming her daughter was missing, last seen near an unmarked minefield. Command told her it was too dangerous. Henson went anyway. The explosion blew through both legs just below the knee. His last conscious thought: bloodied dog tags pressed against his chest, the small red shoe he'd found 30 meters back. When he woke 3 days later in the British military hospital, the first thing he saw was Princess Diana on television, walking through a minefield in Angola, cameras following her famous campaign to ban landmines worldwide. The second thing he saw: his legs were gone. The twist nobody expected: he'd been searching for a child when the mine took him. The letter arrived on April 17th, delivered by a British embassy courier who wouldn't make eye contact. Cream paper, royal seal, handwritten in blue ink. The nurses whispered. One tried to open it for him. He told her to get out. For 6 hours the letter sat on the metal hospital tray beside his bed. Other patients stared. He stared at the ceiling. At 11 p.m. he burned it in the small sink in the corner of the ward. Then couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m. he dug it from the wet ashes, unfolded the charred edges. Princess Diana's handwriting was still legible. Dear Sergeant Henson, I know what happened in that field. I know why you were there. Meet me in Bosnia when you're strong enough. I'll show you why you're still here. No cameras, no publicity, no explanation. Just one impossible promise. The setup nobody understood. Why would she write to him specifically? Diana's landmine campaign was global news. She'd visited Angola in January 1997, walked through active minefields to raise awareness. But this letter wasn't about her campaign. It was personal. It knew something. What Diana knew came from a Red Cross worker named Maria Kovac, who'd been in Sarajevo during the siege. The child Henson was searching for, 6-year-old Amina Delic, had been found alive 2 hours after his explosion, hiding in a bombed-out building 200 meters from where he fell. The Red Cross pulled her out. She was terrified but unharmed. Maria documented everything: the British sergeant who'd gone into the minefield against orders, the explosion, the rescue that followed. She sent the report to humanitarian organizations across Europe. One copy landed on Diana's desk in London. The princess had recently ended her relationship with Dodi Fayed. The press was relentless. She was looking for meaning beyond tabloid headlines. When she read about Henson, a soldier who'd lost both legs searching for a stranger's child, something shifted. The connection forming in her mind. Sacrifice without recognition. Pain without cameras. The twist Henson would only learn later. Diana knew the child had survived before she ever wrote that letter. She knew his sacrifice had saved a life he'd never met. 8 months passed. London, December 1995. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital Rehabilitation Center smelled like antiseptic and defeat. Henson's prosthetics sat against the wall in factory plastic, untouched since delivery. Physical therapy schedules came and went. Other veterans made progress, walked hallways, practiced stairs, returned to families. He stayed in his room. The letter sat on his nightstand, creased from rereading, corners worn soft. He'd memorized every word, still hadn't answered. His physical therapist tried encouragement. His commanding officer tried orders. Nothing worked. The false certainty he clung to, rejecting help was strength, accepting pity was surrender. The letter promised answers, but answers meant facing what he'd lost, not just his legs, but the mission that cost them. Late at night, alone, he'd unfold the letter and read Diana's words again. "I'll show you why you're still here." What could she possibly show him that would make any of this matter? The isolation deepened. Outside, London prepared for Christmas. Inside, a man refused to walk. Diana arrived at the rehabilitation center on January 9, 1996, unannounced. No press, no photographers, no palace handlers. Just a private car and a woman in a navy coat. The nurses didn't recognize her at first. Without the cameras, she looked ordinary. She found Henson in the common room, alone, staring out the window. She sat down across from him. The 14-minute conversation that followed was never recorded, never leaked, never confirmed by palace sources. But people who saw them said this. Diana reached into her bag and pulled out a small stuffed elephant, worn and faded. She placed it on the table between them. "This belonged to Amina," she whispered, "the girl you were looking for. She's alive. She's 8 now. She wants to meet you." Henson stared at the toy, the recurring object he'd been searching for without knowing. His hands shook. Diana kept talking, voice low and certain. "You walked into fire for a stranger. The world needs to know that's possible." The twist that broke him. The child had survived. His sacrifice had meaning. They flew to Sarajevo together in February 1996 against British government wishes. The Foreign Office sent warnings. The palace sent lawyers. Diana ignored both. She'd learned from Angola. Sometimes you had to walk into danger to make people see. Henson traveled in a wheelchair, his prosthetics still back in London, still unused. The flight was quiet. Diana sat beside him, reading briefing papers on Bosnian landmine survivors. When they landed, she took him on a tour of demining operations, walking through cleared fields with survivors who'd lost limbs, families, futures. Henson watched from his chair as a woman his age, left leg gone at the hip, demonstrated how she walked with her prosthetic, how she worked, how she lived. Diana didn't say anything, didn't need to. The key was ordinary, watching others walk with purpose, not pity. That night, in a Sarajevo hotel, Henson asked the question everyone wanted to know. Why me? Diana's answer, according to people close to her, Because you understand what it costs to save someone, and I need people to see that cost has meaning. The next morning, Diana took him to the minefield, the exact spot where the explosion happened, now cleared and marked with small white stones. April sunlight, birds singing, the city visible in the distance. She knelt down, placed her hand on the ground. "This is where you fell," she said quietly. Then she stood and walked 200 meters east, Henson rolling beside her in the wheelchair. An old building, walls pockmarked with bullet holes. "This is where they found Amina, 2 hours after you went down. She was hiding in the basement." Diana pulled a photograph from her coat. A small girl with dark eyes, holding the stuffed elephant, standing beside Maria Kovac, the Red Cross worker. In the background, visible through the window, Sarajevo General Hospital, where Henson had first woken without his legs. The real discovery hit him like a second explosion. His sacrifice had saved a life he never knew about. The rescuers came because of the explosion. They searched because of him. Amina survived because he'd walked into that field. The child's red shoe, the one he'd found moments before the blast, was now preserved in a small museum case in the Red Cross office downtown. They returned to London in late February. Something had shifted. Henson touched the prosthetics for the first time on February 28, 1996. The physical therapist watched from the doorway, said nothing. The first attempt failed. Balance gone, muscles atrophied, fear overwhelming. He fell within seconds. But Diana called that night. Not encouragement, not sympathy, accountability. "You walked into fire for a stranger," she said, her voice clear over the phone line. "You can walk for yourself." She called every night after that, sometimes for 2 minutes, sometimes for 20, never to comfort, always to remind. The press hadn't discovered their connection yet, but they would, and when they did, the second player would enter the story. Media siege, palace pressure, public exposure. The choice was simple: learn to walk before the cameras found him, or face the world from a wheelchair. Henson knew what that meant, becoming a symbol, not a person. But Diana understood something deeper. Symbols change policy. Suffering hidden is suffering ignored. She'd seen it in Angola, seen it in Bosnia. Landmines destroyed lives the world never saw. Until they did. The pressure built. Physical therapy twice daily, midnight practices in empty hallways, Diana's voice on the phone every night. By April 1996, the press had found them. A photographer caught Diana leaving the rehabilitation center after midnight. Henson, visible through a window, standing with assistants. The photo ran in 3 tabloids. The palace wanted distance. Senior advisors suggested Diana end the visits immediately. Protocol violations, security concerns, reputation management. She refused. Instead, she did something nobody expected. She released another photo herself. Henson standing, gripping parallel bars, sweat visible on his forehead, determination clear in his posture. Diana standing beside him, not helping, just present. The caption came from the palace press office. Landmine survivors don't need pity, they need purpose. The letter, the one she'd sent him a year earlier, was now framed on his wall, edges still charred from being burned and retrieved. His progress was tracked in medical charts and newspaper inches. Secret training sessions continued. Close calls with cameras became routine. The twist that changed everything. Diana releasing the photo herself meant she was controlling the narrative. This wasn't about hiding his struggle. It was about showing the world what recovery actually looked like: brutal, slow, human. The recurring object transformed. The letter wasn't private anymore. It was evidence. October 1996. The public announcement. Princess Diana would host a landmine awareness gala at Royal Albert Hall in January 1997. Special guest to be announced. Behind the scenes, Diana asked Henson a question only he could answer. "Will you walk across that stage with me?" 247 days had passed since the letter arrived. He'd spent 180 of them learning to walk again. The rehabilitation center had become his prison and laboratory. What nobody saw: midnight practices, falling dozens of times, the pain that made him vomit, the nights he wanted to quit. What the public would see: a veteran walking across a stage on prosthetic legs, proving landmine survivors could rebuild. The real cost nobody discussed: facing the public as the victim, becoming a symbol instead of a soldier. Henson said yes, not for himself, for Amina, who was now 9 years old and living with her mother in a rebuilt Sarajevo apartment. For the other survivors Diana met in Bosnia. For everyone the world didn't see. The prosthetic legs, polished and ready, waited in his room. The discovery that terrified him: walking wasn't the victory. Choosing to be seen was. January 15, 1997, Royal Albert Hall. Backstage smelled like old carpet and camera heat. 3,000 people filled the seats: royals, politicians, journalists, humanitarian workers. Diana wore a simple black dress, no jewelry except small pearl earrings. Henson stood beside her in a dark suit, the letter folded in his jacket pocket, edges visible if you knew to look. He'd practiced the walk for weeks, 47 steps from backstage to center stage. He'd counted them obsessively. Diana's final words to him before they stepped into the lights: "They're going to see you. Let them." The stage lights hit like a physical force. Applause rose, cameras flashed, 3 governments' worth of diplomatic pressure dissolved into irrelevance. Henson walked. 1 step, then another, then another. His prosthetics clicked against the stage floor, a sound no microphone quite captured, but everyone in the hall felt. By step 23, his hands were shaking. By step 38, sweat ran down his back. By step 47, he'd reached the microphone Diana had set up. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The letter in his pocket, the walk he'd just completed, the 9-year-old girl watching from Sarajevo on television. That was the message. The real discovery: walking wasn't the victory. Choosing to be seen was. The media explosion came immediately. By morning, every British newspaper ran the story. Diana's secret soldier, the letter that saved him, walking into history. Henson's life transformed overnight. Interviews, speaking requests, documentary offers. The veteran who'd refused to walk now became the face of landmine survivor recovery. The palace managed his schedule. Humanitarian organizations used his story. The letter, photographed and reprinted, became iconic. 8 months later, August 31, 1997, Princess Diana died in a Paris car crash. Henson heard the news at dawn, sitting in his London apartment, the letter unfolded on his kitchen table. The world mourned a princess. He mourned the woman who'd called every night for a year, pushing him to walk when he'd wanted to quit. The letter took on new meaning, not evidence of a campaign, but a last connection to someone who'd understood sacrifice without cameras. What the public never knew: The child's story, the minefield search, the real reason Diana wrote to him. The media focused on the recovery, the walk, the gala. They missed the deeper truth. The personal cost was complete. Henson was now a symbol, not a person. The moral question Diana never answered: was healing worth the exposure? Today, Henson still carries the letter. 27 years later, the cream paper has yellowed. Diana's blue ink faded but legible. He speaks at schools, rehabilitation centers, landmine awareness events. He's never shared the full story. The midnight calls, the stuffed elephant, what Diana whispered in Sarajevo. Some things stay private. Amina Delic found him in 2003, now a university student studying social work. They meet occasionally, two people whose lives intersected in a minefield and diverged into purpose. What Diana understood before anyone else: survival isn't about walking. It's about choosing to stand when the world expects you to stay down. The letter transformed one final time, from royal correspondence to burned trash to framed evidence to yellowed talisman. Henson keeps it folded in his wallet now, takes it out when he speaks to other veterans, other survivors. The last line he always shares: "Meet me in Bosnia. I'll show you why you're still here." The answer took 247 days to learn and a lifetime to understand. Some debts can't be repaid. They can only be passed forward.